Okay, we're going to start with this question on production overheads and allocation. And we'll just get the pen here. And it starts by telling you about a manufacturing company which has two production departments. That's the key there. One is called machining and one is called finishing. It also has one service department, and that's part of the engineering. Now, the next thing it talks about is budgeted production overheads. Again, this is budget or planned costs, and these costs here, if we add them together, come to 278, 810. We're getting out the calculator. The next thing, we have some other information, and the idea is to get all these costs and to allocate them between machining, finishing and engineering. When we get the total allocated, now we don't just divide by 3, it's a very simplistic view. The idea, or we don't divide it by 4, 11 and 3, we have to split it out by each of the categories or the information that we're given. So we're given power, supervisory salaries, rent, heat and light, and depreciation on machinery. So let's flick down to the question. Then they talk about the engineering department. This is the service department, and the key thing here is that 60% of the time is in machinery. That's this one here. And 40% of the time is in finishing. So the idea is that when the costs of the engineering are worked out, we then transfer them over to the machinery, the machining and the finishing based on the ratio of 60 to 40. So far so good. So now it's going to give some new information here on direct labor and machine hour input for product X. At the end of the day, we've got to produce something. And it's saying that there are 3 components here. One of labor hours, and then machine hours, and then we got different departments, and there's that hour piece to work out 1 unit of product X. So if we can get a rate per hour for each of these, and again we have the bases and we have the departments they're running through, we can then get a cost value on each here, and then we can get a total here. And that's the idea of this piece here. Now, typically in a question here, you have to work out the what's called the overhead or the absorption rate, and this is simply where we have to work out the budgeted overheads over activity, and that's where we get the absorption rate. And typically the rates in this question probably will help us in the next question, and they do, because then we're asked to calculate the production overhead cost, again the production overhead cost of 1 unit of product X, and again we've been given the information here. And then the sort of generic question is, why would we not use a blanket wide overhead absorption rate? And we sort of touched on that up here, because again this is the total overheads, and again why would we not just divide by 3, or maybe pick one of these components here and just divide one into the other and say there's our overhead absorption rate. We've got to get into more detail of what's driving the cost, and these are the cost drivers here at the top: power, salaries, rent and depreciation. So with that in mind, and I think everyone has a copy of the question at this stage, we'll just get into it. So we'll go into part A. We're asked to calculate the overhead absorption rate for each of the production departments, based on, again, they've given you how to do it, based on direct labor hours of the finishing department. So just out of interest, direct labor hours of the finishing department, direct labor hours of the finishing department, that's this one here, isn't it? And based on the machine hours of the machine department. There's machine hours, machine department. So we need 2 rates here to work out this part of the question. Interesting enough, there's nothing for here. So a little bit odd, and maybe it's part of the question. But if we work out the two absorption rates, we're not going to be able to work out based on this grid part B, which probably indicates we've probably got to work out another overhead absorption rate based on this criteria. Well, do we have labour hours on the machine? And if we look at machine here, yes, we do have labour hours. So there's something going on there. There's the labour hours here for the finishing and the machining. And then the machine hours is here, sorry, it was the 12.7. Okay, so anyway, that's part B. We'll worry about part A. We've got to work out the absorption rates for these two. And let's give it a go. And I think the first thing is we've got to assign the basis of allocation. Well, power, assuming we put a number 1 here, which one would we allocate on power? Well, wattage looks like power. There's nothing else here, so we'll put a 1 beside there. Supervisory salaries, oh, that could be anything really. So we have labour here, and we have employees there. So let's just leave that one for the moment. Rent, heat and light is definitely area, because rent is space. So there's your hint. So we use that one for that one. And machinery depreciation would have to be here in cost. And that's how you allocate it. So we put number 3 there. So again, if you're not too sure of the answer, just skip it and move on to the next one, and then you'll be left with one missing. So supervisory salaries, what are we left with? Well, this is all, well, machine wouldn't be machines. Direct labour is direct labour, but if you're a supervisor, you generally look after people. So more than likely, this would be a good basis. As long as you have a good basis, you have to get the marks. If it's not obvious, just put down your assumptions and then continue with the answer. So now we have the basis of allocating these costs, but we've got the split. So basically 74,210 has to be allocated using machine wattage. So if you add this figure, and this figure, you'll get a figure here. The quick way, because we have to do a bit of maths here, is say on the employees is simple, so that's 4, 11 and 3. So that's 15 and 3, that's 18. So that's the total. That's certainly an easy one. When you're adding this, you're going to get some kind of large figures here. So 220, 80, 180 and 80. This is for area. And the total of all those come to, I think, 480. But because there's a 0 here, you could drop the 0. So it's 22 over 48, 18 over 48, and 8 over 48, all multiplying by number 2, which is 43,200. So I dropped the 0, it's easier to work out. Machinery, again, some huge numbers here. You're probably better off, anyway, if you add them up there, I think you get 560,000, but we'll put 560,000 here for the moment. I'll just put K here, but really you could drop the 0 and you'll have 28 over 56, 12 over 56 and 16 over 56, all multiplied by number 3, 84,000. And that's how you work through it. So what are we missing here? Then area is, we've done the area, machine wattage. I think that total is, when you add these 3 figures, you get 905. Again, that's a tricky number for your calculator. It's a big number, but it's just by a bit of multiplication. So we've done our sort of groundwork. Let's just do out the table. I don't know what's happened there. Everything's disappeared. It's back again. So what I normally do here at the start of is we just do a summary of it. We got 2 production departments. You got one which is machine, and one which is finishing. Again, sorry for the shorthand. In exam you don't have much time. And we also have the service department, and that's engineering. And the idea is, we know that 60% and 40% of the engineering cost here has to be split between machining and finishing. We were also told that there's labour hours here of 7.3. There's also machine hours, which is 12,700. And we also got labour hours which is 18,400. And we know at this point the question is asking for us, if we read the question again, the overhead absorption rate for the production department, the direct labour hours is for finishing. So the finishing is direct labour hours, so this is obviously relevant. And the machine hours for the machine department. So the answer, part A, these two are relevant. So we now do the allocation. We have machine, we have the finish, and we have the engineering. The power is 74:10, and it's in the ratio of 56:26:85. And the total we know is 905. So we better put a 0 here, and we better put a 0 there, or I'll be shot. So 560 divided by 905 multiplied by 74:210 comes with a magic figure of 45,920. And similarly, 260 over 905 multiplied by 74,210 is 21,320, and so on. i.e. 85 divided by 905 multiplied by 74,210 gives you 6970. Guess what? When you add up these three figures, you get a total of 74,210. Straightforward. There's the power one. The next one we look at is the salary, or the supervisory salary, and the total there is 77,400. And the ratio here is a little bit easier. It's 4:11:3 over 18. So simply 4/18 multiplied by 77,400 will give you 17,200. And that's just me showing you the maths. And similarly, 11/18 multiplied by 77,400 will give you 47,300, and so on. Let's move down to the next one. So the rent, heat and light has a total of 43,200, and again the ratio is 22:18:8, and the total there is 48. Similar maths, all multiplying by 43,200 you got 19,800, you got 16,200, and you got 7,200. What's left is the machinery, and again, sorry for the shorthand, but that's where we are. Again, the ratio here is 28 is to 12 is to 16, and that's based on the cost of the machinery over 56. Again, this is 280,000, but again, it's, if you take it all the way to zeros, it's easier to work out the maths. And that gives you 42. This one comes out very even. 18 and 24. Now, if you do a total here, you get 124, 920. You get 102, 810, and 51, 070. Now you got to take the engineering piece, which is the service, bring it down to 0, and divide 51,070 in the ratio of 60/40, because we've only got 2 departments in the production side, and that gives us 30,642, and that gives us 20,428. And magically, if you add these two up, you get 155,562 and 123,248. And guess what? When you add these two together, you come back with that magic total of 278,810. And if you look at that point C, it's part of the question, why wouldn't you just use this? Well, we don't, because we can break it down using some logic between all these other allocation methods, where the cost is driven by all these components to give us a more fairer split. Because if you're using more machine time, therefore that should be weighted towards that department. If you're using more labor time, you should be weighting before that department, depending on the allocation. So if it's more labor intensive, like the salary supervision, so if there's more people here, you've got to supervise, well, you know, that's where the weighting is will impact the cost of each of the production or the departments within the production, i.e. machining and finishing. So where do we go from here? So we'll just repeat this bit here because we're running out of space. And we got a figure here, 155,562 and 123,248. This is money, always important to that's the split. What is that? That is our budgeted overheads. So what we'll do here is to get the overhead absorption rate, and again, sorry for the abbreviation, it is budgeted overhead divided by activity. Okay, an activity can be hours, and in this case it is hours. It can be labor hours or machine time, etc. There's lots of it. So our budget overheads are 155,562, and we were given 2 bases, and let's just run up to the top here what the bases were. The first basis was machine hours for machine, seems logical, and the other one was labor hours for finishing. And they're the 2 key ones that we were given as part of plan A, or question A. So that's the activity. So simply put, to get the overhead absorption rate, we take the 155,562 and we divide it by the machine hours, which is 12,700, and 1 over the other, that actually gives us 12.25, and that's per hour, or machine hour. And taking the other one, 1, 2, 3, 248, and we divide that one by 18,400 labor hours, we get 670 per hour. Okay, and that's labor hours, and that's machine time. But they're the two rates. And that answers part A. Now part B is an interesting question, because it's going back to product X, and we've already worked out, if you remember the grid, we had three bits in here. One, and we might as well just go up to the question just to remind everyone. We have 3 components here, and it is kind of confusing, but let's just follow the question and see where we get to, because it's only for 4 marks. It's asking you, it's telling you that there are 2 hours here, multiplied by a rate gives you a figure, and there's 2 hours here by the rate gives you a figure. But there's another one here, hasn't been worked out yet. It's kind of confusing, but we might as well work it out, because it's on labor hours on the machine department, and we do have that. It's 7,300, and here it is here, because we've already used this one and we've already used this one, so we just have to follow the question. Now we haven't worked it out, so just to add to the problem, so we better work it out, the first bit. So if you remember, it was 155, 562, and this time we're running by the number of direct labor hours, which is 7,300, and that works out at 21.31. And in the question it's saying 1 hour multiplied by 21.31, and that gives us 21.31. The next one is 2 hours, and in this case it's the finishing, and the finishing is the second one here, and that is at 670. And that's 1340. And the next one is 2 hours, and that's at the machine department, which is 12.25. So a little bit confusing. The logic at this point I'm not going to get into, because sometimes you just got to follow the question even though it doesn't make sense, and there could always be an error in the question, but at this point we just got to move on with it. And that's our answer, and that's the production overhead, which is the key line here. Is the production overhead for product X, and that's the key figure that's worked out here. Okay. Number C asks you about the blanket overhead, which we had at 278,810. Well, it doesn't make sense to just use that in total, because we have different components. Which drive the costs. With different components which drive the costs, and in doing that, some are more intensive. therefore have more costs. So therefore you get a better costing, or a fairer costing. By getting a true cost, this can lead to a better pricing decision. Because some pricing decisions are based on the cost plus model, and it can lead you to just better decisions overall, I suppose. Because if you think the thing is too high cost, you may not decide to make it in the first place, and you could be losing out. So better decisions made by split. By splitting out the costs based on how the costs are put together. And that's really points. See, there's lots of little points you can put there, but again, it's only for, I think, 5 marks, and hopefully that'll help answering that question.